As you can see, the build's come along pretty nicely. In fact, we've almost got this whole thing dried in. So the next step is going to be to work on the soffits and the fascia and get that put in before we put the roof on. Now, my philosophy of building is like almost like building a lasagna recipe. It all kind of goes in layers. And so the first layer was the foundation work, second layer was the floor, third layer were the framed walls, fourth layer was the siding, fifth layer was the rafters and the roof, and now the sixth layer is going to be the soffits and the fascia. Now to cut the soffit material, all we need are some pretty simple tools. One is this straight edge, and the straight edge is actually a track system that you can buy, a track that fits on the saw, that the saw will run along a track. But in this case, we're not going to use that track. We're just going to use this as a straight edge that we can run the saw against. Now, we can make pretty straight cuts with this, but one of the things that I want to do when I cut is I've got two pieces of this material, and I'm going to cut my fascia boards out first with it. And the reason why I want to keep this factory edge for my fascia boards, because sometimes when you're cutting with these circular saws, the line may be a little bit wavy, not bad, but if we put our cut lines to the top or to the inside with the soffits, we're able to cover those up with trim later on. And so I'm going to cut out the left side and the right side and keep this factory edge again for the bottom part of my fascia, so that way when you're walking around, you've got the cleanest edge possible that you can see. Now again, to cut the soffit, I'm going to use my circular saw, but one of the things I'm going to do so I can lay this soffit material across the sawhorses and I don't wreck my sawhorses, I've just got to adjust the blade. And what I usually do is just adjust it where the bottom tooth will just barely clear the material. And you may cut grooves in the top of your wooden sawhorses, but it's not going to cut all the way through them. So make sure you know how to adjust the saw and then adjust it accordingly, so that way all I've got to do is, once I get my straight edge set up, I just rip these boards and automate pretty fast work of the soffit material and have it ready to hang in no time. So I got the soffit up, well, mostly. As luck would have it, I ran out right at the end, so I need an 8-foot piece that's only 8.5 inches wide to finish up. But I'm not worried too much about that, because I need to go buy some more of the soffit material to make a door with anyway. So I will just use what I don't use for the door and then finish out this last piece. But I can go ahead and move to the next step. But before we do, there's a couple things you ought to see. If you look up here, once you put your soffit in, you'll notice you can still see sky through there. There's gaps and stuff. Well, don't worry about that, because as this build goes along, again, the whole concept of building it like a layer cake or a lasagna, building just a layer at a time until you get to the very end. One of the layers that we have to do is come back and trim all this. We've got to trim the windows, got to trim the doors, got to trim the corners, and we also have to trim the transition between the front of the wall and the soffit. And once we put that trim in, that'll cover up some of these spaces. And then the last step, to make it weatherproof when you get ready to paint, you come through and you caulk all the seams, and then that way they'll add one more layer of weatherproofness, keep bugs out and also keep the rain out. And then once we get the caulking done, we'll be ready to paint. But I'm not gonna let that lack of material stop me. I've got one more step I can go ahead and get the jump on, and that's putting on the roof.